New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hello again, and welcome to New Thought Today. I'm your host, Rev Z, and we have sitting in for Rev Bridge today, our lovely Laura, bringing us that global perspective from the UK, and we are happy that she's here. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here with you, Rev Z, twice in a week on the network.
I know, and it's so good we had to do it twice. That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And so, as you know, on these Tuesdays, audience, we come together to look at New Thought in general, religious science specifically, and how we can take these principles and activate them in our lives and in our everyday affairs so that we can begin to affect change not only in our own lives, but in the lives of others. And so today, as Laura and I was getting ready for this show, we were looking at all of the stuff going on over in Ukraine and Russia and how that's sending out these vibrations across the globe. And we know some people are feeling despair and hopeless and have a manner of fear. And we kind of want to just look at that from the perspective of New Thought and religious science and science of mind and all of those principles about how we deal with this, right? And I think Laura brought up a foundational piece as we was talking, and I'll bring it up and then I'll turn it over. She said this: when in doubt, always remember this: the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I'm going to leave that there just for a moment because I think that sets a good foundation. And I'm going to turn over to Laura to give her a little airplay on this one. Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, wow. Well, this is such a we need this conversation right now. We all need this conversation because as you were saying that, I was feeling, there were those questions, those difficult questions that we would ask ourselves maybe in the past. Who am I? How have I got here? Where is it all? What is all of this? These really important questions. And now there's like this layer on top of that of not only, right, who am I? How have I got here? And yet, what is mine to do? How am I to be with all of this and coping and feeling at one when it feels like on many levels that there is this separation happening? And how do we get back to that place, or how do I remain in that place of oneness when I'm seeing all of this and feeling it and maybe not even hearing every minute detail of it, and yet feeling the vibration of it, of what's happening, and what is mine to do? God, give me that courage to know what is mine to do and what is mine not to do, because I think as empaths we want to fix it all and do it, really make this, and yet we can't do it on our own individually like that. It's as we join together we can do that, and it takes courage to stand in that place.
And
to
it's
know that
like
we're not separate.
it's like the psalm that says, "Yea, do I walk through the valley of death, I shall feel no evil.
Oh, I
For
love
thou
that.
art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me." And you know, that's such an appropriate psalm for this times, because we are walking literally through the valley of the shadow of death. And
Absolutely.
you know, more so the people that are on the battlefield, but we feel that we see them bombing indiscriminately civilians and children and elderly. And I just saw that they're looking to attack the Capitol now, and they sent a message telling everybody to get out of the Capitol because we're going to bomb it. I mean, that's just ridiculous. How are they going to get out? The trains are not working as effectively, and all of that. So they're walking through this, but we know from our teachings that with thought, with prayer, there's change. And some people try to say, well, that's kind of woo woo. How is a prayer going to change anything? How is the thought going to change anything? Well, one thing to remember is everything we see that's physical, it started with the thought. Somebody had a thought about what a bike would be or what a car would be, and they took that vision, that thought that turned into a vision, and they made it into a physical thing. That's one level. But we also know now with the quantum physics that when we have a thought or when we hold an idea in our heart through prayer, we send out a coherent vibration that is felt by all sentient beings, and it raises or lowers the vibration, which creates a different atmosphere for us to operate in. And that's what we're looking at doing right now for those, if that's all we can do.
Oh, wow. And we are the most powerful beings. We are all powerful, and there's a demonstration of this power going on right now. It's the misuse of it.
Yeah.
If we have that way of thinking and feeling, oh, it's just a prayer, what's that going to do? How's that going to help? Well, that's a defeatist. That's a non-starter from the beginning, because we have a choice. We can either take action for the good, for the higher good, for the highest and best. We can take action that leads to destruction, which actually will only fizzle out ultimately and won't have any power to stand on. Or we can do nothing, which just take inaction, which actually is really just passive, not doing anything. And I choose to do something. I can't go over to the Ukraine right now and fight and do anything physically. And yet you're so right. I have that responsibility to say, well, what am I going to do? What can I do in consciousness? Because if we all do it, then it's going to be a tipping point and it's going to change.
Yes. And it's, if nothing else, prayer should change the consciousness of the one praying, right?
That's
so
it.
If you have no effect on anybody else, it gives you a better perspective or a different way of looking at the issue, so that you begin to act differently, speak differently, and those types of things that we know are contagious. We know that if someone walks into a room and they're in a bad space and they know how to project either consciously or unconsciously, you feel it. Ooh, I feel the vibration. What's wrong with, or somebody walks into a room that's cheerful. Now it has to be balanced, because if it's on the extremes, then it might not be taken as serious. But if it's in the proper space, it's felt. And that's what we're looking. We have to, each one of us have to begin to create this idea that, yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, there's a way out. There are seen and unseen forces that are always working at all, whether they're in our consciousness or whether they're quantum physics vibrations that are moving through the air to make things happen and to change not only minds but physical conditions.
And this, for me, that takes a leap of faith.
Yes.
Because I'm seeing something that I'm appalled by. I'm seeing monstrosities, and I'm feeling the effects of that in my own vibrational frequency. I'm feeling sick, you know. I'm sure people are just feeling sickened by what's happening and feeling out of control. We can't control this, and yet we can, as you're saying, we can control ourselves. I can control me, my thought, my breath, my intention, my attitude. That's one thing I can control, and my reaction and response as well, towards this.
And you know, you mentioned breath. I'll just say this real quickly. I was listening to a program on health and healing this morning, and I was listening to one of the co-founders of Heart Math, and they've done the work, and they know they've quantified it, that if you can get your breath, right, which is really controlling everything, to 6 breaths a minute, 6 breaths, 5 in, 5 out, 6 times, that you begin to create a heart coherency that vibrates out and allows others to match that frequency. And so, because that's what we need. I mean, we've all had personal challenges in our life where it was, for us at that moment, the shadow of death, whether we lost a job, we lost a loved one. But we found when we could get, if you think back, if you found that sync period where you were able to breathe and relax and allow some of the emotions to go away, not all of them, because we need those are our sensors in the environment. But when you can get them coherent, you're able to affect change, and things happen. Things happen.
And we're not taught that. You know, I think we said this the other day. We're not inherently taught to lean on in these non-physical attributes that are here and that we have use of. We're not taught that. We're taught to run our lives by our 5 senses.
Yes.
Or the 5 senses. We're taught that if we can smell it, see it, taste, touch, and feel it, then it's real and it exists, and anything else don't even, you know, don't go there. And yet when we do with that faith lean in on the unseen, we can't see it, it hasn't happened yet, and yet that is the piece that's creating before it's manifested. It's unseen. And I think one thing as you were saying that, what I was thinking was, wow, how I handle the big stuff is a kind of reflection on how I handle the small stuff of my life. It's not small, my life, I don't mean it like that, but I mean those things that, you know, that might be the day-to-day things. How I handle my response to war is going to be a magnified version of how I handle my response to a bill coming in.
Right, exactly. Because what we're dealing with here is a couple of key emotions, if you will: fear, despair, hopelessness, helplessness. And oftentimes we just have to understand we're meeting just what others have met. Everyone that has experienced some kind of loss through death or otherwise, right? And so we go through these valleys, if you will, and we know that we can get on the other side. We know that there is an other side, and that other side is not also more despair, right? So we have to have faith in it now. And this is a story that's kind of off key, but it shows you, I think, what happens when we come to and we release. We come to a safe place, if you will, and we release all of our anxieties and despairs. I lost a very valuable item, photo, almost, and I mean, this is literal, almost 30 years ago. And I was, a situation happened. I was thinking about it. And I just got in a dark place because to me, it was irreplaceable. the photo. It was a photo of my father when he was very young and da da da. And I had a little moment. I let it go and just said, I got to make peace with it. And 2 days later, a cousin that I had, we hadn't lost contact, but we hadn't been in contact as frequently as we used to, out of the blue sent me a picture, that very picture that I had misplaced 30 years ago almost. This was, I misplaced the picture in 1992. And had I been stuck in despair, I don't know what would happen, but I feel that just having faith and releasing it, that's what happened.
And so I know what that was. You had that courage to just dissolve any, it's almost like when we forgive, when I'm in that place of forgiveness, I know seeming miracles happen because I've let go of myself being involved in the story.
Yes.
And in what I think is the story, even because it's not even the story, it's just my own stuff. And it's the hardest thing to do. How can we forgive somebody that's killing innocent or non-innocent? That doesn't come into it. Just to outright, let bombs go on. How can we get to that place? I'm asking myself and I'm asking you right now, how can we go beyond the chatter and the judgment and the news stories and go straight into forgiveness?
Yeah. And it's a challenge, right? Because as you said earlier, the key to it, I believe, is we've been trained to live life only with our visible, if you will, 5 senses, right?
Right.
But we know now through advanced medicine and quantum physics and epigenetics and all these things that religious science sits on, spirituality and science coming together to not only prove each other, but to create a strong foundation to have these kinds of conversations. We know that when we can center ourselves, like we go into prayer, we go into meditation, we go into silence to center ourselves, and it may take practice, some more than others, but it gives us that opportunity to look at things in a broader perspective. And it gives us an opportunity to kind of do some self-reflection, I believe, in terms of, well, what have I done? How have I been out of sync or in sync? And then begin to say, it happens to all of us. Now, some people have big out of syncs and some people have little out of syncs. All right, that may need a little more work, but it is a space where we can where we can forgive. Where we can forgive and learn from that, and by releasing that, we become that beacon of light in that valley of darkness that allows others to do the same and allow us, even better, to do it again the next time we run into it. Yeah. And so, because we're in a world that's constantly in motion, that center point begins to change on every situation. And I think often we might get stuck on, this is how it has to happen every time, and that's not the case.
Yes. And also, I believe that there can be a tendency to get stuck on, well, if God loves me and God is love and God is the goodness, the greatness, the all-givenness, the kindness, the beauty and the joy, how can this be happening? Yeah. How can this be happening? And even for somebody who, like myself, if I'm following this philosophy, this way of life, new thought, religious science, even I might have those questions going off. Even you may have those questions going off. It doesn't mean that because we are in this philosophy that we still don't get moments of, well, for me, I speak for myself, I still get those moments of, well, how can that? And then I go back to the truth. Well, it is happening. It can happen because we're in an infinite environment. We're in an infinite atmosphere. Yes. And it's always going to be there's going to be that contrast. As Abraham Hicks, you know, I love Abraham.
Yeah.
And she says, you know, the contrast is going to be there, and it's going to get greater and greater until we really say what we really, really, truly want.
Right. And we live in a ever evolving world. I mean, and if you don't think that's so, things we have today, we didn't have 10 years ago or 100 years ago for sure, because we are evolving. We're getting new information. We're opening ourselves up to different ways of being and learning and visioning and all these things, reminiscent to the ancient ones that we look to, these stories and aphorisms that they use that are pointing light today. And we begin to, when we understand that, we know, especially from the perspective that all things are connected, it is ever evolving. And when things get out of sync, when they get out of coherency, which is demonstrated by contrast, and there'll always be contrast, it's just whether it's big or little, then we can begin to figure out, okay, well, I know we're going to have swings in life, but I want my swings to be right in here. I don't want them to be all over the place. You know, God said, I know there's going to be highs and lows, but I want my highs to be high lows. I want them down in here. And so that's what we have to begin. And that starts with a conscious thought. It making a choice that I will look at each situation I'm in, and I will begin to try to look at it more holistically and not from my own selfish place. Although I may, need to. I don't want, because it's easier for me to get, if I look at it from my personal perspective, I can easily get stuck there and not look at anything else. So if I go out to the bigger picture for me and come back down to myself, now I can see a little better of, well, how do I change it? What did I do? What didn't I do? And it's not about blaming yourself, but it's about taking a true evaluation of the situation.
Yes. And this is another opportunity, I believe, for that to happen on a mega level.
Yes.
For that to happen on a mega level where each of us can wake up and say, how am I running my life?
Yeah.
How can I, maybe in the smallness of my own world, my own life, how I'm, am I passing someone by on the street and smiling? Am I having a kind word for the person who doesn't have a home and is sitting on the floor with a cardboard box around them? Am I being that generous person, paying for someone's pint of milk in the queue before me?
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
all of that stuff. And this is, okay, you're right. This is like a real extreme of something that's happening. It's like we are living in an ultra extreme. It feels very bizarre to turn on social media and see a war happening in real time in our lives.
Yes.
In real time, I'm seeing all of this happening. Yep. And I talked with this about this with Reverend Jesse Jennings yesterday on the Cosmic Prayer, and he said, this is oneness happening. This is like, we're really in oneness now for this to be happening in real time. We're seeing it.
Yes. Yes. And most, that's funny, because most people think oneness is all happiness.
All hearts and flowers. Yeah. It's all rainbows.
Yes. But that is a possibility.
Yeah. And we're in an infinite potential of possibilities.
Yes. And that's why I think, that Ernest Holmes's idea of, the first paragraph of the book, I look forward to the day when science and spirituality walk hand in hand. And that's where we are now. We've gotten there. And all of the,
we have,
I won't say all, but a heck of a lot of information marries these two fields of study and show you that they're just two sides of the coin. And we're dealing with the seen and the unseen, right? And when we are able to let go of our miseducation, let's say, based on a worldview that was, some might argue, was not meant for wholeness of the individual, it was meant more to control. Some would say that. But when you're able to marry this stuff, and then, as Ernest says, practice it in the laboratory of your own life.
Yeah.
Now you begin, because you need to see some, like my getting that picture that I hadn't seen, that took me to my whole consciousness now has changed just by a picture. And when we can do that, when we can allow life to experience, allow ourselves rather to experience life in its fullness, and look at these little things that we think we may not have had some effect on, but we do. Now we can have no problem saying good morning to the guy in the box, and here's get a cup of coffee, or give a smile, because we know we're creating a field that allows everything to rise up. Or if we don't do that, we can make it go the opposite direction,
the other way,
to go up.
And there, there's that whole thing with New Thought, with Science of Mind. If your life isn't as good as you want it to be, it's your consciousness, and there's this blame going on within. It's not, because these things, these contrasts are happening in every moment, and we get to choose how we navigate them. I get to choose how I navigate the contrasts. And I think the more evolved we become, we can take these larger things that are happening and look at them from that larger perspective, and mindfully say, well, I get to choose how I see this. Yeah. I know I'm seeing it and it feels crappy and it feels horrific and I feel unseparated. It feels like everything is separate. And yet when I choose to come back to these principles, the principles of what we believe as religious scientists, if I choose to really live my life by these principles, then I'm choosing a whole new track, a different track.
Yeah. And if we get, if we get into this idea, well, I'm going to see if I can put something out there to refute it forever. We don't live in isolation, right?
Right.
It's just me in the world and nobody. So trying to say what is in my consciousness, it's not just your consciousness. We live in a global oneness that is all connected. That one thing affects another at either a seen or an unseen level, right?
Yes.
One of the mistakes that we have come up against is we think cause and effect are closely related, and they're not. Everything we do is not like I stick my hand in fire and I get a burn. No, there were things like when they did Agent Orange, let's say, over in Vietnam, they knew some of the effects, but they didn't know any long-term effects because they didn't have a chance to study long-term effects.
Right.
So the cause and the effect were not closely related. 10 years, 15 years later, they're seeing all these results of that action that they took. 10 years later, you may be forgotten about an action or a conglomerate of actions or things on the outside of an environment. So there's so many factors that we're dealing with. That's why the idea of spreading good, of good thoughts, because we don't know how long it takes for that thing to germinate.
And to come back round to us, and we don't know when these events are happening and how horrific they are even. Yeah. We don't know when we're praying and we're owning it and praying and sitting in that stillness with thousands and millions of other people doing the same thing. We don't know the incredible effect that is going to have.
No.
Right now in this moment.
Yes.
We don't know. Yes. I mean, today I did a prayer on prayer time here. I prayed knowing that the tipping point has happened already and it's done. And it's done. And this has happened.
Right. And
because that's how I feel. I don't want to wait a year.
No, and that's the consciousness that we have to put forth, because we're dealing with an exact science, right? If I if I'm playing music and I'm supposed to play the letter C, C sharp won't do. That's close, but
Yes.
I have to play C, right?
Yes.
And not D or E or A. And so in that same vein, when we say these words of power, as some people call them, these conscious, moving, energy focused things, we set things in motion based on the vibration of that, based on the intensity and the emotions behind it. That's why the breathing is helpful, the centering, the being clear. That's what we do. And we know, again, if you do it enough, you know it has effects. And so you do it and you let it go. It's like the germination between a tomato plant and an apple tree are two different time zones. It takes, 2 weeks, I think, at most for a tomato seed to germinate. It takes a little longer for apple seed. But in their right time, they take effect if they're given the right conditions. And it's the same thing with our prayers. We have to begin to understand, whether it's intuitively or otherwise, what my prayer is doing and what kind of surroundings and environment it's in to give me some inkling. It's in God's time, not our time, but it gives me a way to know how to cultivate that. I say the prayer and I act as if it's done. I say hi, I'm interacting with people in a different way to support that idea, to support that prayer. And then we let it germinate and do its thing.
We let it germinate, and knowing that we're going to draw to us exactly what we need for that prayer to come into action in our lives, whether it's a phone call or a post that we see or an email that gets sent or someone that comes into our awareness. Oh, wow, need to have this conversation. Because us being here right now is the effect of a prayer somewhere along the line.
Yes.
The I should be here instead of Rev Robert today.
and you know that's so true.
Yeah.
I didn't know he wasn't going to be here, and you didn't know he wasn't going to be here, and so boom,
and here we are.
Hey, and I wanna just take a break here real quick and highlight a special program that we have going now. I call it special, so I'm gonna take a short minute break here, give you this special presentation, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
And there you have it. Wisdom of the Mystics. Reverend Kathy and Laura produces that on the 2nd and 4th of every month. So next Tuesday before this show, that show will be on. Please join them. They're doing great work, having great guests, shedding some light on the history and the wisdom of these teachings. You want to say anything about that real quick?
I do. It's such a great opportunity to be with Reverend Kathy Mastroianni from the Science of Mind archives, and her wisdom and her knowledge of how she really is just embodied in the work of Ernest Holmes, and then to have these other wonderful teachers coming on talking about their mystic, who they love and who they know has brought these teachings to where we are right now. That's not to say, we're open at the top. We're open everywhere for newness and for new understandings and for this, as what you're talking about, our evolution. And yet there's something about these people, these mystics, that they knew it above and beyond even in the, they didn't have technology. They didn't have what we rely upon right now. They had maybe a clearer technology of the divine because they didn't have all of this. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so true. I mean, they had the same technology in a lot of ways, I believe, but it was more intuitive, if you will. It was more they were more attuned to the frequencies that was within themselves, and not attuned to the frequencies outside, where the computers and the phones and TV, and those things are very much needed, because now, where you used to take a week maybe to get a letter from here to the UK,
yes,
now I can do it right now.
Oh,
we just have to use the tools that we've been blessed with and afforded with in a more conscious, uplifting way, and a lot.
So all in this evolution that we now have, this, as we evolve, of course, because that's what we're doing. That's the nature of this thing called life, this experience.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, everything else is going to evolve with it, the technology and all of it. So we can become much more discerning as to how we use this, because this is here for us for a reason right now.
Yeah.
And even now, I'm sure you see, we go onto Facebook, and there are so many prayer groups, spiritual communities, beautiful communities, not necessarily New Thought or Science of Mind, just beautiful people that are saying yes to knowing love and wanting to be that expression of love and joining together in big communities. This is very powerful.
Yes. I mean, because we're all connected.
Yeah.
And that's, there are no isolated things in the universe. And so when we begin to really understand that, we begin to learn about how to act better, how to behave better, how to think better. Not so much because we're creating some damnation world, but because we know there's a reciprocal factor that's going into the universe. We commonly put it, you get what you put out.
Oh, yeah.
You reap what you sow.
You reap
right?
what you sow.
But there is no way for me to plant tomatoes and expect to get cucumbers. It just doesn't happen that way. And so if we're going to talk about moving through despair, we're going to be talking about elevating peace and cooperation and dialogue and all these things to minimize the contrast that we are inevitably going to get, because we are all individual lenses unto the world. We have to begin by understanding that there's a reciprocal cause and effect. Reap what you sow. Pick the aphorism that works for you, but that's how it all works. And when we can begin to, little by little, every day operate from that space, we begin to see the results. Sometimes we'll see it just in ourselves by we feel different. We look at situations that used to make us upset, and now we're not so upset.
That's true.
And then eventually somebody's going to notice. You used to get really ticked off when that happened. What happened? What you doing? What's going on? Now you're in a place to begin to continue to first, you get encouraged because you just been doing it for yourself. Somebody's noticed now. You say, ooh, that thing is working. Let me keep working it. And now you get an opportunity to share that with somebody else and let them try it as well.
Yes. And we can see that in ourselves also if we've had that growth. I see that. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I could hear their dialogue, and I could hear that would have been me 10 years ago with that dialogue. And then I recognized, wow, I can really see we're all here as a mirror for each other to see our where we are, how we are managing and coping with our own lives.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing when I think of it in that way.
Yeah.
It means that everything is here is showing me who I am.
Ergo the thing, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art
Yes.
with me. Because
Yes.
that's the process of becoming, if you will. We're always in a process of becoming. We're never stagnant. Even when we think we're stagnant, we're changing. Our body is changed. Our mind is changing. And so you put this up early. You brought this up. I want to bring up this slide because I think it kind of adds some light here. Again, I want to come back to grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what it comes down to.
Yes. And that takes, and that for me, that feels as if I can surrender my sense of having to be in control. And I think that's the scariest thing for many of us, is to surrender that full sense of security of being in control and saying, okay, there's something greater happening here that knows itself. It's experiencing itself through everything. It's an infinite presence. It's the presence of the infinite. Yes. And it knows it. And I can surrender to that and have faith in that. I can say that easily here from the UK. If I was in the Ukraine right now, I may be having a different conversation with you.
Or it may take a little longer to get into that space.
Yeah.
But the key thing that you said in that little phrase right there is we have to be, or the thing that came to mind, we have to be willing first. We have to be willing to do something different, to look at it different, to allow ourselves to experience things differently and begin to look at life more collectively, more holistically. I personally do not believe in the idea of giving up yourself, right? Because if I give up myself, you lose all the wisdom and understanding that I've gained from my experience.
Right.
So what I think is a more holistic approach is to say, hey, let me keep my perspective, but let me hold on to it for a minute before I start sprouting my stuff, and let me look at somebody else's stuff. Let me look at another view because they might see it differently. And the pieces where my stuff is good in the middle, but then on the fringes just start falling apart, and yours just might make it happen. And now, as opposed to this, now we have this, and it expands.
Yes, and that's why I love this teaching and this way of philosophizing, if you like.
Yes,
that's why I love it at whatever level, because we get this opportunity to question. I get an opportunity to question myself and not feel bad about a way I might have been thinking, because that's perfect. It's got me to where I am right now. And then I can choose again and say, it's okay. I can let that be. And I can have another way of experiencing my life and the thoughts and the beliefs that I have. I can choose them and handpick them as much as I can.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many every day, but it's like, it's just this amazing way that we can live, where not shaming ourselves, not shaming myself, and being willing to be that human detective for my own life.
Yes. And you make me, and I don't know what you said to make me think about it, but it oftentimes requires us to be focused. We're living in a society now where it dictates, however you want to claim it, to be multitasking and multi-this and multi-that. And those things are good. But to be focused, I get a different kind of perspective. And the guy once told me, he said, look, if you want to understand the difference between focus and multi-purposed, look at a light bulb. A light bulb is multi-purpose. If I get close enough, it'll give me a little heat. It'll give me light. But if I really want to take that light and focus it, I get a laser. And now from that laser, I got a lot more power, and I can do a lot more things by focusing that energy than allow it to diffuse into all these different things. And that's how we have to begin, I believe, to look at our lives. We got all these things challenging us and calling us and beckoning, but we have to pick one, ideally at most two things to focus on. Let's get a handle on them. Let's ingrain and keep them in our lives, and then we can move on, because at that point you become a master. When you can focus on a thing and make it happen because you focused on it, now you're a master. Now you can move on. So when you see masters, they're normally masters of several things, because they begin to see, like we said before, where this thing connects with this other thing, and it's just an extension. It's not something new.
Yes.
Speaking to the wholeness.
It's that, to thine eye, with thine eye be single. That's just came into be single and have that vision. And I think that's the piece for me about, New Thought today, is that we're allowed to have a vision. And even if we're meant to, that's what we're here to have, this incredible vision for our lives, not just our own individual lives, but how we see the collective and the planet, and to stay with that vision, because without it, we are running the old story and depending on the old story the whole time, and that's what's going to keep showing up.
Yes. It is something that is just, I don't know. It's something that we have to work on, obviously, because as they say over here, I don't know if they say it in the UK, but they say, give me that old time religion, right? Well, when I hear that, I think about myself being from the South, and that old time religion was a religion where you felt into it. It wasn't, you had to get involved in it. You had to allow it to get within you and move you and transform you, not just talk about it. You had to do something
to feel it.
That's what we need now. We need that old time where you get involved with this teaching.
Yes, where it's beyond words and it's a direct experience, where we have that experience, and we can do that by talking, because I think talking disseminates the layers. Kind of allows us to be heard, and free, and not judged. And then in that place, from that place, we can start opening our hearts and start feeling the feeling of the divine within.
And that's why they say, I walk by faith, not by sight. I'm feeling into this thing. I don't have to see it. I'm feeling into it.
Yes.
And when I do that, that makes things happen.
And that goes back to what you were saying in the beginning about, our heart and the resonance of our heart and the coherence of being so attuned with the breath and the heartbeat, and opening our hearts to love and being that for ourselves. That, I think, that is one way of being that antidote, or, walking in the valley of death, is to be the love for ourselves. First.
Yes. Because how can I give something that I don't know myself, or something I don't have myself? And that's what it comes down to. I believe we have to begin to incorporate I can't give you what I don't have. So I need to go out and cultivate it for myself, or find it for myself, if I want to have any idea, any opportunity to give it to you. That's that. So the thing becomes, how do we do that consistently? Do it with heart, and do it in a way that that allows us to do it joyously, not begrudgingly, not in a way that, like, oh, got to go pray again. Oh God, that attitude is not going to be a healthy one.
No, and I think that when we create that container for ourselves of prayer, and Reverend Jesse was saying this yesterday, when we get that feeling of warmth and connection and awareness, and then kind of like package that up and keep that feeling even when we're out of the prayer in our everyday lives, then it becomes almost like we want to get back into prayer again and feel it again.
Yeah.
So I for me, it is all about the feeling, the whole thing.
Yeah.
How can we feel love for somebody that is murdering people? How can we feel and know that love for them as well? Because we're all one. We can't separate the love that we feel. It takes a lot.
It does, and I found this prayer. I tried to bring it up real quick. That I think it's called a prayer for the decade of nonviolence, right?
Okay.
And let me see if I can bring it up here.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I know that language that's kind of small. Maybe I'll make it full screen. But it says, I bow to the sacred in all creation. May my spirit fill the world with beauty and wonder. May my mind seek truth with humility and openness. May my heart forgive without limit. May my love for friends, enemies, and outcasts be without measure. May my needs be few and my living simple. May my action bear witness to the suffering of others. May my hands never harm a living being. May my steps stay on the journey of justice. May my tongue speak of those who are poor without fear of the powerful. May my prayer rise to patience, discontent until no child is hungry. May my life's work be a passion for peace and nonviolence. May my soul rejoice in the present moment. May my imagination overcome death and despair with new possibilities. And may I risk reputation, comfort, and security to bring this hope to the children. Mary Lou Kosnick.
Oh, and so it is.
And so, I mean, that prayer speaks directly to this moment.
Totally. And to read that every day.
Yes.
And set that in motion in our hearts. It's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we want to put that energy into the universe right now. That these things that seem simple, thinking about all sacred beings and visioning for them, and when we do that in a collective group, and we know if we get back, one of these programs, we're going to have to just deal with all the science of this. We know they have devices for the scientifically inclined that measures the coherency of heart and thought as people send their energy to a specific thing, a focused idea. It changes the space, it changes the environment, and it changes things within the environment, i.e. us. And so we just have to begin to believe, as you said in the very beginning, and have faith in these tools and technologies.
Yeah.
And it will happen. It'll happen.
Yes.
And so one of the things I want to just before we come back and close, we're trying to spread this consciousness and this way of teachings all over the globe. And so we have an opportunity for you to make some travel. And if you're ever in your part of the world, there's a conference coming up I'd like to let everybody know about that they can maybe attend this summer. Here we go. And there you have it. So if you're ready to do some spiritual journey and adventure and to anchor this stuff, there's an opportunity if you want to travel and get to see how this teaching is applied and revered and all over the world. There we go. So if you need more information, send something to ntmedia.org and we will give you more information. So Laura, as we get to an end here, what would be your final words and thoughts on working through this despair and fear and all of the stuff that's going on right now?
Okay, so I feel it's really important to own those feelings, whatever they are, to let them be heard, let them be present, let them surface. If it's anger right now, let it be so. You know, we can't squash this. This is why this is all happening, because people suppress their feelings and it comes out magnanimously. So we have to do this intelligently. We have these tools to forgive. We have these tools to go within, cry if you need to cry, go to the beach and scream if you need to scream. This is really important.
Yes.
To own our feelings, to own how we feel, and to do the work within to love ourselves as fully as we can, and to find that place of peace within our hearts where we know that that peace resides.
Yeah. And I agree with that so much. And I would just say, you know, to echo that and to you know, build on to that would be, we have to begin to practice these principles. Just reading them and knowing them and beginning to, you know, to be able to talk about them is one thing, and you'll get some level of benefit from that. But if we want to, you know, we want to get out of kindergarten, as they say, and go to first grade, we got to start doing a little practice. We have to implement some of this stuff in our lives. There's no race, there's no competition, but there is an accountability.
Yes.
And so I think we just have to practice on prayer, practice on being still, practice on getting in touch with our feelings and, you know, getting in sync with them when they're positive, and when they're not, getting in sync with them to find out why they're out of sync.
That's it.
Because that's the ebb and flow of life. And when we can do that, we're going to be so in tune when things like this happen in the future. We can nip it at the bud, as they say. We can begin to have conversation and understand things and put efforts to change them before they get to a place now where we got, you know, loss of life. And so, Laura, I want to thank you for being here on.
Thank you
New Thought
for
Today.
inviting me to your program. It's beautiful. Thank you.
And please, everyone, check out on the 2nd and 4th Thursday,
Tuesday.
Wisdom. I mean, I said Thursday. Tuesday. I'm way ahead of myself. Tuesday, the Wisdom of the Mystics. And with Laura and Reverend Kathy, it's a great show. You will love it. Go back and look at previous episodes. All good stuff. And you know, before we go, I want to put this up there one more time to remember. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so with that, we leave you with love, light, and insight. Peace and blessings. Until next week.